I do want to take the time right now to introduce our seminar speaker. I met Gary at the Stretch Glass Society, and he is known as the king of Imperial Jewels, and I'm sure you will understand why. He was gracious enough to come and visit us 2 years ago, and then gracious enough to come visit us 1 year ago, and he finally has the opportunity to visit us today. So, you know, good things are worth waiting for. And so I want to introduce to you Mr. Gary Senkar.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah. I've been waiting 3 years to do this. I'm glad to be here. All right. So the first thing I'm going to mention, because glass collectors like to know, one of the first questions I get asked to get started. Well, my wife and I, Cheryl, started collecting carnival glass 25 years ago. She nodded and said I'm right, because I don't remember dates that well. And it was about a year or two in that I fell in love with Imperial Purple. So I decided to go to the Imperial Glass Convention to find all this rare Imperial Purple that I couldn't see or I couldn't compete with you guys at the conventions. So I went down there, and much to my dismay, I found one piece of old Imperial glass in the whole place, except for what Carl Burns brought. He was the banquet speaker. He had 100 pieces, but that was the only old carnival other than this one piece that was for sale. So I went to the auction, and this piece was black with dirt, but I just loved, it's right in the middle. It's from the cream and sugar. And this was just black with dirt, and I just fell in love with the shape. I didn't know what it was, but it had the Iron Cross on it, and that enticed me. So I bought it and took it home, and I put it under the faucet, and it just glowed. And I called my wife, and I said, look at this. So that was my first piece of Imperial Jewels, and I just started looking into it, and we have this. That was how I started. So a lot of you probably know what iridescent stretch glass is, but just a quick review. It's defined as pressed, and this is defined by the Stretch Glass Society. It's pressed or blown glass, pressed or blown molded glass. It's iridized. It's generally has no pattern. You know, occasionally you do find a piece of with a pattern in it, or a minor pattern that has stretch effect on it. And it's been reheated and or reshaped, and that's what gives it the stretch marks. So it's the reheating and the reshaping that makes it different than carnival glass. And Imperial Jewels is a little bit different than most stretch glass in that it is often double doped and then reheated again. And occasionally we find pieces that look like they were even triple doped. So it gives you the brilliant colors and the great stretch effect.
Can I ask what LEHR stands for?
That's layer. The layer is after the piece is made, it's put on, I don't know all the terms, but on a conveyor belt basically, and goes through an oven or a cooling facility, the layer, so it gradually cools down. If it doesn't go through the layer, the glass would crack from cooling too fast. So this is what stretch collectors look for. It's that effect. And the name stretch, you know, it's kind of an odd name. Where did it come from? So this I have to say this is a quote. Okay, Barry Wiggins told me this many, many years ago. He was, I don't know if you know the name, but he was a researcher, glass researcher, and wrote some books, quite a few books. And he quoted Rose Presnick, who was a very early collector of carnival glass and glass in general. And she said that stretch glass is different than carnival glass. It has no patterns and an iridescent effect that looks like the stretch marks on a woman's belly. I hope it didn't, I apologize, but that's, again, a quote by Rose Presnick. So that's where we think the name came from. The very first stretch glass made was the New Art line of shades by Imperial Glass. They came out with a catalog in 1912 showing shades in 3 colors: pearl white, pearl ruby, and pearl green. Now, that was supposed to be a skip slide. Then in 1916, it was announced in a couple of trade journals that there was a new line of art glass showing in the Chicago showroom. And it was being shown in the colors of pearl white, pearl ruby, pearl green, pearl amethyst, and pearl silver, 5 colors. Late in 1918, I think that's the date of the ad, there were ads in the trade journals for Imperial art glass. Another one. In those ads, there was this very verbose and flowery copy that was in it. And remember, this is an ad to the trade that supposedly it's signed by Earl Newton, who was the president of the company at that time. And the line was originally called the art glass line. As you can see, I should point that out in the heading. See if it'll go backwards. And it says Imperial art glass in the heading. But in this ad, about 3 or 4 times, Newton uses the terms Imperial Jewels or the Jewels of Imperial. So I think, of course, that's where it came to be known as Imperial Jewels. For years, when I was first collecting, everybody said, well, it's called Imperial Jewels, but that's not the real name. And, it's art glass. And it was kind of looked down on, that you didn't know what you're talking about if you called it Imperial Jewels. But I think it makes perfect sense to use that terminology because Earl Newton thought it was a good thing. And I think it differentiates from other art glass, which I've never really been able to find a definition that 10 people in a room could agree on. What is art glass? It means a lot of different things to different people. So if you call it Imperial Jewels, people know what you're talking about. So here it announces that this appeared in another Imperial catalog. And what it says is this series of catalogs, including catalog 103G, is coming out in early January 1918. 103G is the catalog that the Imperial Jewels first appeared in. In that catalog were 5 color showing 68 different mold numbers, 68 different, all of which were available in each of the 5 colors that I mentioned. There were numbers through number 88, but there was only 68 pieces. So there were a lot of numbers that were never used, and we don't know what they belong to or if they ever made them. But there was this piece, which you see on the lower right, which was quite common. And we didn't know for a long time what this was called, you know, but they made a lot of these. This is not a terribly uncommon shape. It was a catalog that came out about 1921 or 22. Excuse me. And it showed about 14 pieces of Imperial Jewels. And it had 2 new numbers in it. I mean, of those 14 pieces, 12 were the same exact numbers and same shapes, but they had a number 92 and a 93. The 92 is the ruffled top piece. Excuse me. And of course, this piece is the number 93. So it solved one mystery, but it added a few others. Now we've got numbers to 93, but we've only identified one more piece. So there's a lot of gaps that we don't know what they were supposed to be. And just quickly here, this is to differentiate. Again, the Imperial Jewel line came out in 1916 in the pearl finishes. Around 1921, the ice finishes, the line of ice finishes came out, and that's a whole different set of colors. All the colors are quite different than the Imperial Jewels colors, except for the iris ice, which is on the lower left. Iris ice looks much like what was called pearl white. I don't think you can tell the difference between iris ice and pearl white. But all the other colors, even the marigold type color, which is rose ice in this, is quite different in tone. But they did produce Imperial Jewels all the way through the early 20s at least, because here Imperial Jewels bowls are, and they have the Imperial Jewels numbers on them, are shown in a freehand glass catalog from 1920, which came out in 1923, and they paired freehand candlesticks, and the one on the lower left, of course, are vases. They paired the candlesticks with the Imperial bowls as console sets. So the line was around for a long time. So how do you know if you've got a piece of Imperial Jewels? Well, the easiest thing, of course, is that most of it's got the Iron Cross on the bottom. I would say 99.5% of the pieces plus that I've ever seen of Imperial Jewels have an Iron Cross. Now, because it's a ground base, which is another way to identify it, all Imperial Jewels is going to have a ground base. So I'll explain a little bit more in a second. But sometimes because of the grinding, part of that Iron Cross will get ground off or get ground flat. But occasionally you'll find a piece that never had the Iron Cross on it. I have no idea why, but every once in a while you find a piece like that. And usually you can get a better price in the store that way, because they don't know what it is. It's much, you know, it's very easy to identify when it's got the cross on it. And they say the ground base, oh, it's all ground. It's a ground base because instead of sticking up or instead of grabbing the piece by the collar base, and I don't have a piece of carnival here, but most of you are familiar with the base of a carnival bowl or a carnival vase. It has the Marie on it that the Punty would grab hold of. And that's how they held it when they put it in the oven and when they sprayed it for, they iridized it or doped it. Well, instead of using something that they didn't have a Marie to grab hold of, they used this, what they called an iron Punty. This is a sample of it. And it was just a flat plate with a rim on it. And with the heat, when the piece was heated, it would be applied to the bottom of the piece of glass and taken out of the mold that way. And then they would take the punty and they would strike the rod, and the piece of glass would break off. When the glass broke off, it had a rough base, and that's why they had to grind it, so the piece would sit level. Now, because of the grinding, occasionally there would be chips in the base, and you've all seen that. But most collectors of Imperial Jewels don't mind that. I mean, a lot of times people look at it and say, oh, it's got a chip in it. Well, a chip in the base is natural in the grinding process. They didn't try to make every bit of these perfect. They were mass producing it to make money. So a small chip or so doesn't really matter to most of us. Of course, if the chip goes up the side of the piece, that would detract from it, even to me. Just a quick point on new art vases, because a lot of times people confuse new art and Imperial Jewels. And let's see, where did I leave it? Excuse me, I got to go in front again. The easiest way, two pieces of glass that sitting on the shelf, I couldn't tell you which one was new art and which one's Imperial Jewels. I don't think most of you could. This is a piece of Imperial Jewels, and this is a new art vase. Of course, the ground bottom and the iron cross gives away the Imperial Jewels, but the new art vases are always going to have a polished pontil, beveled edge on it, and I've never seen a new art vase that did not have the name new art on the beveled edge. Very often, it's almost, I held it backwards. This is the new art vase. I have to look at it again. New art vase. Very often, it's almost like when they doped it, they just overdoped it, and it filled in the raised letters, and they're very, very hard to read. But again, I've never seen a new art vase that didn't have the block letters new art on the edge. So they're really not that hard to tell apart, even though they look very similar. So another way, you're looking at a piece that's got a ground base, probably has iron cross on it. It's going to be in one of actually 7 colors. There were 5 published colors, as I mentioned, and then again I'll just say it's the pearl white, pearl amethyst, pearl silver, pearl ruby, and pearl green. But there has been enough found in a marigold on milk glass and smoke on milk glass in the same shapes, many times with the iron cross on them also, that they added those colors somewhere down the line. And they are hard to find, particularly the smoke on milk glass, but they are around. So pearl ruby is the most common color, probably to find. And a lot of people just call it marigold, but pearl ruby was what that Imperial called a stretch. And that was the definition of, or the definition of the glass of pearl ruby in the catalog. Crystal glass with rich ruby predominating, but there are also flashes of gold, green, and other shades of color in this soft, warm ruby. It's pretty much marigold glass. Pearl amethyst is probably the most popular, as most purple is with collectors' glass. And actually the pearl amethyst, I've never seen an actual description in the catalog, but it's without a doubt, it's a multicolored rainbow iridescence on an amethyst or purple base glass. Now, there is a definition for pearl silver, and it's an amethyst glass with an exquisite silver covering with traces of red and other colors, also with an amethyst base glass to it. Pearl green. Pearl green varies tremendously, okay? Now, in the catalog itself, in the Imperial catalog when they brought it out, it says in there, and I paraphrase, that the colors of these pieces vary tremendously because of the great heat, the tremendous heat, they actually said tremendous heat required to make them. So what they're saying is no two pieces are going to look the same. That is mostly defined by pearl green. Most times, people have never heard of pearl green. A lot of times it gets called marigold. I've heard it called clam broth and lighter degrees of it. And I've heard it even called smoke. But give you some idea, pearl green can vary tremendously. I mean, I have pieces that I've looked at 5 or 6 times in the time I've owned them, and I keep changing my mind as whether it's pearl ruby or pearl green, because they can look very close. Is it really important? Well, maybe not. You know, I mean, you can call it whatever you want after you own it. As long as it's pretty, that's fine. Now, here's a vase that is pearl green. Looks a lot like pearl ruby, but pearl green is always going to have a bit of green in the tint, at least that. Take a piece like this bonbon, and there's a lot of dark olive in it. A lot of people think this may be what they are trying to attain with the pearl green. I don't know for sure. It varies so much that it's what they wanted it to look like. Here again, pearl green. Now, you're going to have to take my word on a lot of these things. You know, you're going to go, this man's crazy. That's pearl green. This is pearl green. Very light. This is about as pastel as I've ever seen it, but that's also pearl green. Yes, because green is also clear. It's clear base glass. Now, occasionally, you look at the pieces, and I think it takes on the tint of essence, but sometimes it looks a little gingery. Describe it as clear base glass. So it's the doping or the iridescent. Here's another piece. One auctioneer I bought this from said it had a pink tone. It's pearl green. It does have a little bit of a pink tone in it. And this is a little bit more olive than something like this. Now, the surprising thing to me is, I said, you know, pearl green was made in the shades. This is a pearl green New Art shade from 1912. This is more typical of what the shades look like in pearl green. But I've never seen a piece of Imperial Jewels that looked like this. So from 1912 to 1916, they changed the formula apparently, but they kept the same name for the color. Let's see, I'm just looking. Maybe some other, now this is very similar, maybe a little bit lighter than that other big vase. I'd call this one pearl ruby. And I did actually, when I was packing this stuff up and making these signs, I went back and forth on this piece and that piece. You know, which label to put on it. Should I call it pearl ruby or should I call it pearl green? Today it's pearl green. All right. Then you have pearl white, and there's a few pieces here. This is actually the hardest color to find of the 5 catalog colors. Pearl white. They said they describe it as having much, looking like mother of pearl. Again, it's a clear base glass. I haven't found too many pieces that have a brilliant iridescence to it. It's a little bit flatter. And this one even has a very faint green tone to it. And this piece here, the Gyp Vase. And I've never seen, there are some pieces, particularly the bigger pieces, I've never seen in pearl white. I have seen, for example, one of these, but I've never seen this vase, never seen those other vases on the end in pearl white. And now we come to Marigold on milk glass. Most of you are familiar with that, and smoke on milk glass. I say Marigold on milk glass has been found on probably, I'm going to say maybe 8 different shapes over the years. I think that one of the easiest to find is, they call this a nappy. This was a number 57 nappy. Yeah. That was their terminology for it. You find that this is probably one of the most, the easiest. Also, and that doesn't mean it's easy. It's just one of the easiest in Marigold and milk glass. This piece, which is an undocumented shape, again, is one of the easier pieces to find in Marigold and milk glass. It's apparently made from the same mold as some of the other identified pieces, but they shaped it, I guess we could call it a spittoon. They shaped it differently. Yes, this has the Iron Cross on it. And so did the first piece I had, the nappy. But again, that shape, just exactly shaped like this as a spittoon, comes up not infrequently. Smoke on milk glass, I've only seen, I have to count them, 4 pieces, 4 different shapes. And actually, of 3 of them, 1 each. That's a number 78 vase, that's just like this. A bowl, the small picture is a number 76 bowl, like this. And I have a vase on the second shelf there that's smoke on milk glass. And then that bowl on the bottom is an oddity. It's a number 50. And they're found with smoke on milk glass on one side and Marigold on milk glass on the other. I've seen it both ways. And when it's done with the 2 finishes, it has that metal rim on it. I never bought one. I had the opportunity once to buy one, and it was so ugly I passed it up. I said, I'll find another one that looks better. Never seen another one to buy. But I have seen about the person that other people. Oh. I said, we've been calling it Marigold on milk glass forever. But what did Imperial originally call it when they made it? Well, it was a couple years ago that Dave Shetler and I were going through some information. Most of you know the name Dave Shetler. He's Bug Doc, Mr. Carnival. Mr. Stretch. He taught me a lot of what I know about stretch glass. And we were talking about these old articles in trade journals. And we're going over the information, and we found this trade journal from 1921. and this is basically a reporter goes to the showroom. He comes back and he writes an article in the trade journal about, what he saw that day, what was new in the showroom. And the article said, describing orange onyx, new finish. The soft, deep orange color gradually fades into the most delightful shades of onyx, and its beauty is further enhanced by an iridescent coloring. Now, at the same time, they said, new finishes, orange onyx, iris ice, which remember is the white ice color, and I'm trying to remember what the term is. I'm going to say rainbow. Rainbow is one of the names for what we call a pastel marigold color. But those were three colors that they brought out in 1921, late 1921, early 1922. And there was a second article with some very similar wording in a second trade journal that came out a week after that first one. So we believe that the original name for Imperial's Marigold on Milk Glass, was orange onyx. Smoke on milk glass, we've never found any other terminology. I say that's very, very rare. So of course, those are with the 7 colors. It's if you find an 8th color, you've got a real treasure, because it's one nobody's ever seen up to this point. So the last that identified, you found the ground base, the Imperial Cross. It's one of the colors. If you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty, it's just looking at the, the catalog or line drawings. Line drawings, like you see on the right, are actually done by Dave Shetler, and they're on his website. You can download them. And there's 4 pages of them. I use them extensively in identifying pieces. They give approximate base sizes, in a lot of cases, heights, and occasionally, of course, diameters of bowls that will help you identify it as a particular piece of Imperial Jewels. Well, the number of ruffles you got to count for yourself. For example, here's 5 different pieces that are all have 8 ruffles, but they vary from small bowl on the left up to this vase on the right, which is one of the bigger pieces in Imperial Jewels. Now, nobody's going to confuse these two, but if you're looking at a picture, on a website, you have, it's sometimes hard to tell the difference. And of course, you've got the 3 other sizes in between. There's other pieces that are very similar in shape. I've tried to put them together a little bit to see the differences. There's a number 1, which is a fairly common shape, one of the most common, and a number 7 vase. Now, there's a difference in base sizes, which again are shown in the line drawings, and there's a difference in height. This is typically 5.5 inches tall. The number 7 vase is about 1.5 inches taller than that. Fairly consistent. I mean, but even heights will vary a little bit. But if you have a vase with that shape, to me, I want to know which one I'm bidding on. Do I want a number 1 or a number 7? Now, for example, I've seen this in all 5 colors. I've never seen a number 7 in anything but pearl amethyst and pearl silver. So if one came up in pearl ruby or pearl white, I'm on it. But a lot of people would think it was just a common vase. You have up in the upper right, you see a number 3, a 14, and a 29. This is a number, I don't have a number 3 here. I brought 60 of the 68 pieces. But a number 3 is the shape you see there, and it's about 5.5 inches tall again. But here's a number 14, considerably bigger, fatter piece, bigger diameter base. The number 29 is bigger yet, about this proportion. Then you see on the bottom a lineup of flared top vases. Here's a number 4, number 5, a 30, a 31. Now, again, you can see from a picture, something on a website, they all look the same. The number 4 is pretty common. Number 31 is very uncommon. Number 5, fairly common, but not as common as number 4. So again, it just depends on how seriously you want to get into it, and if having a variety in different sizes makes any a difference to you. So here, talk about identifying the pieces. For years, the cream and sugar, which have only been found in pearl amethyst and pearl silver, never had a number. And actually, I've never seen it identified in stretch in the catalog. But the same shape, here we go again. The same shape was made by Imperial in many other treatments. I've never seen it in the catalog in Carnival, but I've seen it in other non-iridized colors. They did it with etchings, they did it with cuttings, and they did it plain. And it was always identified as a number 606. So I'm thinking, and this was before Imperial Jewels came out and after. They had it in other treatments. So I'm thinking they just said, this is a popular cream and sugar. We'll use the molds and we're going to iridize it in the pearl colors. Some pieces of quartz are much more rare than others. One of the rarest is this number 28 vase here. I've never seen another one. I'm sure someone's got one under their bed, but I've never seen another one, anywhere. I'd like to know about another one. Very easy to misidentify as an 84. Again, if you're looking at a picture, there's a tremendous, this is one of the biggest pieces in Imperial Jewels. This is a medium-sized piece. If you saw a picture of it, would you know which it is unless they gave you some dimensions and checked it out? But, I mean, this is not common, again. The big pieces are difficult to find, but much more difficult. So number 28. The number 11 Gyp Vase, which again I've gotten pearl white down in the end. I've seen or heard of maybe 6, 7 pieces in that shape. The number 12 in the middle, 3. 2 in pearl ruby and 1 in pearl silver. Again, I'm not saying these are the only ones, because we all know that more pop up eventually, but the only ones of surface at this point. The number 88, Where do we put some? They call it a flower bowl. The number 72, which they call the flower pot. Nothing particularly exciting, but I've only seen a handful of these, this shape. And usually in pearl ruby, I've seen one in pearl white. This is pearl ruby, yeah. Now, the number 9, which was called a sweet pea vase, come over here, was apparently made from the same mold, but the top came out flat. It actually, the dimensions on it are about 9 inches. There's one. And it's the only piece, the only shape of Imperial Jewels that I don't own. The only one I've ever seen. Now that's a picture from the catalog. But there is one in person, and that is in the Corning Glass Museum in Corning, New York. I actually made a trip. Well, the first time I saw it was online. We were at Corning, my first visit to the museum. My wife and I were there. We went to the museum, and she's looking at a computer screen. We're at the end of the second day going through the museum. And we're looking at she's looking at the computer screen. Out of the corner of my eye, this vase flashes at me. And I said, wait a minute, go back. I caught it, and I knew what it was right away. So I had been doing some research in the library in the afternoons, and I asked the librarian about it, and they said, oh, if you let us know, we'll actually pull it. That's in the warehouse. It's in our inventory, but they didn't have it on display. We'll let you look at it, but we need notice. Well, that was 2017. We finally got back last December. And I gave them a month's notice, and they actually pulled the piece, photographed it for me. They wouldn't let me touch it, okay? I was allowed to get that close to it. But they pulled it out. I went to the warehouse. They set it on the table. They said, there it is. And it's the only one that I know of, and it's in pearl white. Again, maybe not an exciting piece, but it's rare. Now, I gave you all the ways to identify a piece in Imperial Jewels. I'm going to talk about a couple things that often get misidentified as Imperial Jewels. One is this color. It's a very brilliant, shiny, iridescent color. Here's a number 77. They didn't call it a bowl. This was a vase. Again, their catalog. We can call it a bowl if we want to, but that's a number 77. That's the number 77 shape in this glossy purple. Or blue, actually. I don't have this particular bowl shown here in the stretch, but here's that same finish on what is a number 55 bowl. Now, for years I wondered what these were. They have a ground base. They're not stretched, but they're all from Imperial Jewels molds, usually bigger bowls. Is the only thing I've seen in this. Now, I've seen a few other, like there was a basket, an Imperial basket that I saw in this finish. There was what we call a wide panel bowl. I've seen one that was in this finish. But mostly what you see in this finish are Imperial Jewel shapes, but not stretched. And usually they do not have the Iron Cross. Now, I've heard of 2 pieces of this that were identified as having the Iron Cross, but I've never actually held one to identify it. But I, believe what they said. Surprisingly, they usually do not have the Iron Cross on them. So, because they're not stretch, they're not Imperial Jewels. Because Imperial Jewels is stretch. It has to have a stretch finish to be called that. But that's usually how they get identified. So once again, in a catalog, called the Supplement to the Bargain Book, which came out in, that would have been about 1924. They identified, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different carnival finishes, and they describe the colors. They're describing Irish ice finishes, or ice finishes, which are the later stretch. And they're also listed, there's about 20 lead luster colors, which actually that's how we pinned down the catalog to 1924, because it's well known that 1924 is when the lead luster glass came out. And this is the first glass that lead luster shows up in. But where I'm going is under the carnival finishes, and I had to borrow Galen's computer because we were having a lot of difficulty getting the projector coordinated with my computer. And it's smaller and I can't read this as well. Under the carnival finishes, they describe a finish they called purple glaze. Okay, what's purple glaze? A very brilliant blue iridescent effect. I can't read. I think it was done with this glass of the plain blue iridescent expensive lead luster glass. Okay? They're comparing it to a finish on the new lead luster. This is the lead luster glass. This is it was their number 10 finish in lead luster. And this is what they're comparing it to. So it pins it down. We know what purple glaze was, because this is very well identified as the lead luster finish. This is a candlestick from lead luster. So a new carnival finish for everybody, purple glaze. So although I do buy them, I collect them because they're the Imperial Jewels shapes, they would not be, or should not be considered as Imperial Jewels pieces. Just as, well, smoke on glass. I do not consider this Imperial Jewels. It's got ground base. It's got the Iron Cross on it. It's the number 10 shape. So I've got all that. But it's not stretch. It's just plain iridescent glass as carnival. So because it's not stretch, I'd like to say it's Imperial Jewels. It's an Imperial Jewels shape. But just like this, it's not stretch. Looking for another example. You can see, again, 3 pieces on the left that are in the lead luster number 10, and 4 different bowls in, and again, from Imperial Jewels molds in the number. Then there are other oddities. Occasionally, you see in the top left, and we see the smoke on milk glass on the far left. There are pieces that have phosphorescence or phosphorescence treatment to it. I don't know if it was on purpose or a mistake in what they threw in the batch that day or what, but here's again, it's a fairly common vase in pearl amethyst, but it's got phosphorescent rim at the top, and you can see the base glass also. And again, very few people, you're looking at virtually everything I've ever seen with phosphorescence. This piece is mine also. I don't usually show it. It's got the complete ruffled top because I bought it with a crack all the way up and down it. So that's something you want to travel with. Here's a piece unidentified, not in the catalog. Pearl Amethyst. A lot of people ask, should it have a lid? I have no idea. I don't think so. Like a little spittoon, but it's Pearl Amethyst. It's stretch. It's got a ground bottom. It's got the iron cross. It's one of the missing numbers as far as I'm concerned. This piece here is a real mystery to me yet. It apparently takes a lid. I call it a candy bowl base. I've got the stretch finishes. Again, it has a ground base. Sometimes has the iron cross. This has the iron cross on the inside. I failed that before. Occasionally, usually on bowls, you'll find the iron cross on the inside of the piece rather than the outside. I have no idea why, but I mean, even the same pieces. One bowl you'll find with the cross on the inside, same style bowl you'll find it with the cross on the outside the next time. But I found this both ways, inside and outside. I found it in pearl silver, pearl ruby, and I found two of them in non-iridized. Never found a lid. There is in later catalogs from the 40s and 50s in non-iridized glass, they show what looks like the same piece with a lid on it. So I said, aha, and I bought one. The lid doesn't fit. So again, a lid for this I've never found, unidentified, but I believe it's just one of the pieces missing one of the numbers that didn't really get produced. Now, the piece in the middle was voted, oh, I don't know, it was about 8-10 years ago. Stretch Glass Society did an article for the publication for the Museum of American Glass, and it was about the rarest, most desirable pieces of stretch glass. And a group of us voted on it, and the only Imperial piece that made that list, the top 10, was that piece in the middle. I unfortunately don't own it. Again, it was a number 10, like the smoke on milk glass. Here it is with the ruffled top flattened out, but that's what the base piece is. And it has the cut ovals over all the base, all around it. And now the cut ovals like that are really is something that was used or done quite often in Imperial on various glass pieces. So we do believe that it was done at the factory. But I've never seen another piece of Imperial Jewels with the cutting on it of any kind. So that's just a super, super rare piece. And it's gorgeous. It just, you look at it and the light shining through it, it's just amazing. Oh, mention this. It's the heck of it. I picked up the one plate. There were 3 plate sizes in the catalog. They called the 2 smaller sizes card receivers, and they called the large 12-inch piece a sandwich plate. A chart usually today. Here's another piece that I've found in 3 of the colors. It's uncatalogued, but I found it in 3 of the colors. It's a little over 6 inches. And they have the ground base and the iron cross. This one's a pearl green. Or pearl ruby. I think it's pearl green. Here's a piece that doesn't quite fit any of the illustrations or the dimensions I have, that if you look at it, it shows you the ground base on that piece is just, it's about an inch, maybe a little bit bigger wide. I've never seen another piece ground that much. And it just, although it looks much like something else, other pieces up there maybe, it doesn't fit the description of anything else. Just bought it for the ground base. And then, you know, talking about, you know, unidentified pieces and missing numbers. I guess my time's running out. You know, I always thought that, you know, because I measure the pieces and I try to identify everything I buy. And, you know, this is a typical, what they call a number 34 bowl. Fits perfectly all the dimensions in pearl ruby. So I got this bowl, and I measure it, and it's got the number 34 base size. You can see it was reshaped. And we know that, you know, glass gets reshaped all the time, you know, by whatever the glassmaker feels like at that time, once in a while. So I always thought this was a number 34 bowl, with just a different treatment. But I found enough pieces of Imperial Jewels that vary a little bit like this. Well, you know, maybe not a little bit. Vary a little bit like this, and I started to wonder, is this another identified number? Or is it just a variance of the real number 34? I have no idea, but I think that's another way of looking at it. It could be something unidentified, uncatalogued. Again, you may not care. I care. That just shows you a few more pieces you're talking about. And there's the, you can see the phosphorescence on that number 1 vase in the pearl amethyst. So, now we're going to get down. Excuse me, I got to tie my shoe. You don't want to trip a piece of glass in your hand. Most people are familiar with the Imperial Paperweight. Always seen in amethyst or purple. It's marked with the Iron Cross, the New Art logo, and what's the other one? New Art. Thank you so much. It's heck when you don't have your notes. And it was called a paperweight. There was, again, an article in Trade Journal that I saw more recently that announced that there was art glass paperweights in the showroom. That's about all it said. And it said identified with the three names on it. Had to be this. It's the only paperweight I've ever seen from Imperial with the 3 logos on it. I was fortunate enough in 2017, same trip when I first went to Corning and found that number 9 vase in their inventory, is the paperweight in pearl green. Now again, it's got a lot of green tint to it. And you might argue and call it ruby or marigold, but I think it's definitely pearl green. And I found this on Facebook originally. A gentleman, it was on the Imperial Facebook page. They were doing a show your favorite piece of carnival or iridescent glass, something to that effect, you know, week. You know, so everybody puts up their favorite piece. And this man puts this online and says it's the only piece of iridized glass I have, the only piece of carnival glass I have. And I looked at it and I said, and he called it marigold, of course. And I looked at it and I said, boy, I think that's pearl green. Now, I quite associated the paperweight with the Imperial Jewels line. They look like they're pearl amethyst, but there was no reason to, you know, pin it down. And I was always interested in what era they were actually made. So it turns out it was a friend of a friend. And I emailed him. I got his email, and I said, I'm real interested in that piece, and I'm going to be up your way in a month, and I want to come see it. Could I come see it? And honestly, the only reason I wanted to see it is I wanted to make sure it was pearl green, and not pearl ruby, or what color it was, because it's hard to identify in a picture. So we made this trip there. I was up there for a convention, and he lived near, he was in eastern Pennsylvania. He was a candlewick collector. Most people know what candlewick is. Only piece of non-candlewick he owned was that paperweight. He bought it near Bel Air, Ohio, in an antique store. And he said, "Would you like it?" And I said, "Yeah, but I can't afford it. You know, I mean, we know what the purple ones go for." And I wasn't in a position to pay even for a purple one on that day. But he said, "You deserve it. You love it." He said, "Here, take it home and send me money when you can." And that's what I did. So, and that was, but it was a bargain. I want to tell you, the man was like, I couldn't believe it. It was a bargain. There wasn't anybody in this room that wouldn't have bought it on that day, I guarantee you. You would have found some way to say yes. Yep. And now we're friends. And he actually does have the most amazing collection, if I can say that, because I'm not a fan of candlewick, but he has an amazing collection of candlewick, things that you'll never see anywhere else, just tons of unique pieces. That's all I've got. Sorry, it was a little haphazard today because I'm using another computer, missed some of my notes, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
That ball on the bottom, is that the one that's considered
This
the
one?
next one? Is that a silver rather than
This would be pearl silver, yes.
silver? Okay.
Yeah.
Because of the silver thing.
Yeah, it's, again, it's basically pearl amethyst, which again is an amethyst-based glass with rainbow, you know, basically purple, but you see reds and blues and even greens in it sometimes in the iridescence. That's what pearl amethyst is. And pearl silver is basically that, but silver over the outside. Now, a lot of times when pearl silver, anything that looks ugly is called pearl silver for some reason. That comes from, you know, silver is a bad thing to most people in carnival iridescence. You know, silver iridescence is ugly. So they see an ugly piece, and I've seen a few pieces of real ugly Imperial Jewels, but it's always called pearl silver. And I probably do that too, but then you get pieces like this, and it's got a beauty, you know, you may not appreciate it. I mean, we all don't like all colors, but I think it looks fantastic. I love a real good pearl silver. If you come up and look at some of the pieces closer, you may too. But I didn't bring any ugly ones this time, I don't think, so I can't show you an ugly one. Anything else? Yes.
When did they stop using the Imperial cross?
I think, and now it's easy to identify when they started. They actually started with the fancy colonial line, which is called Optic and Buttons in Carnival, but they called it fancy colonial. That was the first thing they used the Iron Cross on, in crystal only. They made fancy colonial only in crystal for up until about the 20s. And then they came out with other colors, and I think that's when they started doing iridescent colors too. And that came out around 1912. But it's impossible to know when they stopped using it because it just kind of tails off, I think. I would guesstimate that we know that it was done on some Imperial Jewels pieces into the mid-20s. I think probably ended by 1929, 1930, but I can't be sure. I've seen crystal glass, a lot of crystal glass. I've seen red glass. It was used on a lot of what we just call cheap, inexpensive glass. I saw the Imperial Cross on. Yeah, there's quite a bit of other pieces. Yeah, but I can only guess because of the finishes that you find it on and the styles, maybe through 1930. But that could be wrong. You know, it could have gone in. I don't think it went any further than the 30s, but even that I couldn't be 100% positive of, but pretty sure of. Non-iridized. Non-iridized. I'm sorry? No. They actually used, they called anything that was marigold color, they identified as having reds. They would say that red predominates. This goes in what we call Marigold Carnival. Their original name was Ruby Gold, and they described the color as red predominating. Matter of fact, there were ads in the teens that, again, in trade journals, that had a headline, red carnival or red iridized glass. It was Marigold, but they had big letters, red iridized glass. But you read the description, and then they had their M was their code. It'd be like an M40 bowl, and M stood for marigold or for ruby gold, and these pieces all were M's. Everything that they had in the ad that was called red iridized glass. Anything else? Thank you.